All right, let's get this party started. Let's talk about content pruning for SEO success. I'm Mike King. Greetings and salutations, folks. Please follow me at iPullRank on all the things. You can grab the slides from here because I've got a lot to cover in only about 15 minutes of your time. I'm from an agency called iPullRank. We serve the enterprise and mid-market brands for SEO, content strategy, and generative AI. And that is enough of a commercial. Let's get back to the lecture at hand. So, if you're doing content marketing, organic search is likely your biggest traffic driver, whether you know it or not. And so as a result, we've all just done more and more content because for a long time, that's yielded great success. The more content that we did, the more up and to the right, the more the KPIs are getting hit. Google has come under a series of existential threats over the last couple of years, some of which are unfounded, some of which are founded. The ubiquity of synthetic content on the back of ChatGPT, and also the perceived loss of search quality are big things that they need to account for. You may have seen a lot of people say appending Reddit to their queries is a much better experience than using Google itself, and Google, of course, reacted to that. But this is partially the fault of marketers. We all, or many of us, do what's called the skyscraper technique, wherein we identify content that's performing and look to make a better version of it, and then go after all the links that content was capturing. But most people skip that second step of actually improving the content. At the same time, every tool on earth is integrating ChatGPT, and so more and more tools are popping up for generating synthetic content at scale, which means we're getting buried under a mountain or a deluge of crap content, as Doug Kessler warned us back in 2013. Shockingly, Google loosened their stance around generated content around that same time. Previously they would just say, machine-generated content, you can't use it at all. But they still had to respond to all these threats that are going on, and they rolled out what's called the Helpful Content Update. A lot of people expected that was going to crush a lot of sites that were built on synthetic content, but I don't believe that Google can reliably detect that content. And I said so a couple weeks prior to ChatGPT rolling out. And in fact, OpenAI can't even reliably detect it. They've killed a tool that they use for it because they said it was only detecting at 26% accuracy. However, what Google can do is use detection in terms of the other signals that they've got. And so that's where EAT is something that is, worth considering and thinking about. Because if they say, okay, we think with reasonable confidence that this is generative AI content and all these other measures are not, performing well, let's demote this content. And that's what happened. There are a number of sites out there that are purely synthetic content with no editing or anything like that have gotten crushed. And then the Helpful Content Update really started to show its teeth as well. A lot of niche sites getting crushed over time. But what people aren't talking about is that indexing has gotten a lot harder as well post the Helpful Content Update. So you may be seeing a lot more discovered currently not indexed or crawled currently not indexed, because Google is identifying that these pages don't add anything beyond what they've already got, and so they're just not crawling or indexing those pages. The last wrinkle in all of this is that the search engine publisher relationship is changing. And it really started with search engines like Neva, who were creating these bigger featured snippets that were more robust, using information from pages using a methodology called retrieval augmented generation. And so Google has their version of it in SGE. And it hasn't rolled out at scale yet, but when it does, we're projecting an average loss of about 40% of organic search traffic for different websites. So the moral of the story here is that more content does not inherently mean more performance, especially at this point, because there's no guarantee that you'll get traffic from Google by creating more content. That said, you should still only be making content at the intersection of your audience persona expectations, your buyer persona expectations, and search engine expectations. And so that hasn't changed. You still need to be creating things that people actually want and optimizing them accordingly. So why is it that sites perform better after content pruning? Well, you may have heard of About.com. They split into several different websites. like Dot Dash, LifeWire, The Balance, and so on. And those sites in aggregate outperformed About.com, and in some cases individually outperformed About.com as well. And one of the reasons for this is that this has created better topical clustering. They didn't just put all of About.com on these different sites. They said, okay, so for The Balance, let's make this all finance-related content, using the content from About.com as a base, and so on and so forth. And so that created better topical clustering, meaning there is better relevance in that content. About.com was a scattershot of a variety of things, whereas these are more focused. And so with topical clustering, you have pillar content, which is the core subject matter, and then you have the additional subjects or like subtopics around that subject matter, and everything is interlinked between each other to establish this topical cluster. So to make it more real, imagine we've got a topical cluster about Disney World planning, and then we've got a page about Disney World restaurants, budgeting for Disney World, so on and so forth, and they're all interlinked. That's a topical cluster, and because you've got a series of pages around the subject, you're seen as more authoritative than if you're a site that has one page about the subject matter. And so we like to think of this as like the golden triangle of SEO. And in that triangle, you've got relevance, user experience, and authority, with relevance being the paramount thing here. And so when you do this content pruning, you reinforce the topical clusters and you reinforce the relevance of the website. Now, how is this a thing? Well, Google's made a lot of improvements in the state of the art for natural language understanding over the last few years. So Google also shifted from what's called lexical search, which is really just the counting of words, to semantic search, which is understanding the meaning of words. Now, all search engines operate on what's called the vector space model, where they take your query and they plot it in multidimensional space. They take documents, they plot them in multidimensional space, and they look for the documents that are closest to the query. Those are going to be the most relevant documents. Now, these words are converted into coordinates in multidimensional vector space. And in the past, we had what are called sparse vectors based on TF-IDF. And so, you would have pages represented as a bag of words, meaning for a given subject, what are all the unique words that are being used on these pages? Okay, now count in this matrix how often they're used across these different documents, and then plot those in multidimensional space to see which are closest to the query. That's a very unsophisticated way to do it as compared to what we have now. Google rolled out something called Word2Vec back in 2013, where they were just able to get better at capturing meaning, but not necessarily context. Then they rolled out BERT, which is built on the transformer technology, which is also the T in ChatGPT, and they're able to better understand the context. So if you have a word like riverbank, they didn't understand that was different from bank when you're talking about making a deposit under the Word2Vec model. But with BERT, they now can understand that. And so fundamentally, this is how Google works across all its different search products. And really, embeddings allows Google to understand content relevance much more than before because it's encapsulating a lot more information. Now with embeddings, Google can represent websites, they can represent authors, they can represent effectively anything using this concept. And also, relevance is not a qualitative consideration, it is very much a mathematical or quantitative consideration. So famously with these vectors, it's been shown that you can do these mathematical operations to get to the different relationships. So as an example, if you take the vector for king, subtract the vector for the word man, and then add the vector for the word woman, the next closest vector from that will be the vector for queen. So you can get to those relationships just by doing these different mathematical operations. And so relevance is the function of a linear algebra concept called cosine similarity. So you can identify whether or not vectors are similar or orthogonal, meaning that they don't relate to each other, or opposite. And so the more similar vectors are going to be the more relevant pieces of content. Google can also use math to determine if your content is original, using these concepts of information gain. So think of it as if you've got 10 documents about the same subject, which of these is saying something new and which of these is not. And so they can give a boost to content based on that, and they have a whole pattern around this idea. So we're now in a world where everyone can regurgitate content at scale. You need to find ways to be both unique and mathematically relevant. Now let's get into the content pruning process. If you look in the echo chamber of SEO, you can find many people that have said like, hey, we've pulled down some content and then we've seen things improve. Aleda has a great process for this, which is difficult to scale, but it's a great process that you should check out nonetheless. We like to automate to get to a determination of what content to keep, what content to revise, and what content to kill, and also what content might need further review as an edge case. Because we're dealing with websites that have millions of pages, and we may not have the ability to go, through a whole process and determine one by one with the sites that we work with. So one of the concepts to be aware of is this concept called content decay. So if you launch a piece of content, it does really well, but you don't do anything from it, or to it rather over time, it's going to lose the traffic that it's got at its peak. And so you can identify this by looking at your analytics or looking at Google Search Console. But it's not enough to just identify that pages have lost traffic. And so what we've done, using inspiration from something that Trevor Klein previously at Moz came up with, the one metric, was determine a measure to figure out the potential for a piece of content, called the content potential rating. And so using the same idea that the one metric used, we're taking search volume, we're taking keyword difficulty, we're also looking at your current rankings for all the keywords associated with a given page to determine what is the value, what is the potential of a given page if we optimize it. And so it's on a scale from 0 to 100, and basically anything below 40 you can just prune right away. There's some edge cases here that we account for as well, but really it's anything in that 60 to 100 range you definitely want to optimize. 40 to 59 you might want to think about. Everything below that you're probably just going to get rid of. So if you combine that CPR score with the pages that have lost traffic, you can determine whether or not it's worth optimizing. So the steps are: 1, you pull the rankings data from SEMrush in the organic research positions report, and then you want to pull the data from decaying content from Google Search Console. So really you can just do a year-over-year comparison for the last 3 months, and then filter for pages where the click difference is negative, meaning smaller than 0. Or you can just pull all the pages if you want. But just to get quickly to pages that in the past have performed, you can use the content decay approach. And then you drop them to the spreadsheet, press the magic button to calculate the CPR, and then the output will be those URLs with an action next to it. So the ones that are marked as review, those are ones that may still be worth optimizing, but you need to do some digging to determine that. You can get your copy of our content pruning workbook at this URL. Now, as far as how do you kill your content? Well, 1, you want to no-follow it no-index it, and then also no-follow links to it, because the content may still be valuable for other channels, but for search it's not. And revising content, there's a number of things that you need to do here. Really, the main thing I want to highlight is that you need to be reviewing content across your topic cluster. There's tools out there that help you with optimization, but they only look straight up and down the SERP for one keyword that you put in. You need to be looking across the topic cluster because Google is reviewing content in context with that. And then for reviewing content, the ones that we mark as that means that there's still some search volume there, so you may want to take a look at that content. What about SGE? Well, we're modeling the threat in a similar way, but the main difference is that we're looking at the keywords that are worth optimizing for versus those that are going to be lost causes. So just to wrap it up, move away from just making more content. Know that Google is better at discerning bad from good. Review your content regularly, automate it if possible. Prune the low potential non-performers and revise the high potential non-performers. Like I said, I'm from iPullRank, and yeah, you can get everything you need from these links here. That's all I got.